Okay, folks, I'm here to introduce our first speaker this afternoon, and probably like you, when you introduce people and they're in a technical area and you read the introduction and you realize you don't understand much of what you're about to say, that's a time that it's going to be an interesting presentation. So I'm here to introduce Ray Harishankar. He is an IBM fellow from IBM Research focused on quantum safe. Ray is responsible for driving the overall strategy for IBM quantum safe products, and product engineering. He leverages deep technical expertise of IBM in security services, post-quantum cryptography, and pragmatically applies it at clients. He advocates their capabilities and leadership in quantum safe with his clients. He engages in the banking, telecommunications, and government sectors, and is a technical advisor. Technology advisory council for select clients and universities. He's been with IBM since 1991. He is nominated as a distinguished engineer in 2003, as an IBM fellow in 2006. And I will skip ahead that, of course, he was honored with the Distinguished Alumnus Award by Ohio State University College of Engineering. May I introduce Ray Harishankar.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Am I audible? All right. Good afternoon, guys. Good afternoon. You could do better. You could do better. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Awesome. See, I do need your energy for me to, keep active. And I am quite animated. I walk back and forth, so please stick with me. And I'll give you a heads up. If you don't ask questions, I will. So usually, I'm sure you prefer the former than the latter. Okay. So the only thing I'll call out in addition to the excellent introduction that Todd gave is that I've been focused on this. As an IBM fellow, I get to do interesting things every 4 or 5 years. So whatever is coming new, you can put your hand up and say, I want to go work on it. But this one, quantum particularly, is the way I say it is where my passion meets my profession. I do have a background in quantum mechanics and then computer science. And when quantum started to develop, I said, aha, this is where I want to focus. So figured out that I could do something quite interesting there. So started focusing on that in 2022. So it's about 4 years or thereabouts that I've been focused on it. So what I'm going to talk to you about, you can break it into 4 sections. One is introduce quantum computing to you, introduce quantum to you, and quantum computing. Second is what kind of progress have we made in quantum computing, right? So you're tracking to where are we today, right? Then I'll talk about what we are doing that means something to you. In other words, the so what of that. What does it mean to higher education? What does it mean to building a workforce of the future? And I would like for that to be very interactive. So if you have any questions at any point in time, do not hesitate to put up your hand and interrupt me. I don't have to drain all my slides here. That is not the intent. I want to have an interesting dialogue, right? And then towards the end, I will talk about some of the really here and now kind of things, and then finish with where are we headed? Where is this going? When does this become real, really productive and production oriented, right? And be adopted. Fair enough with me so far? Sure. All right. So starting with the basics. How many of you have heard of or know of quantum computing? Wow, excellent. So keep me honest here. So the thing that we do at IBM is our mission statement is we bring useful quantum computing to the world and to keep the world quantum safe. Now, towards the end of it, I'll talk about what the second half of the mission statement really refers to, because that is something we all need to be concerned about. Not that we don't need to be concerned about the first one, but the first one presents a lot of opportunities. The second one poses a challenge that we need to address really quick. Now, the way we look at computing going forward, you've all heard of bits, right? CPUs. You have all heard of GPUs, right? We were just talking about consuming a lot of power in data centers. GPUs are known for consuming a lot of power in data centers. And we could call them neurons, right, for argument's sake. And then qubits or quantum computing is the third. So CPU, GPU, QPU, if you will. The combination of all three of them is what we see as computing of the future. So right now we are focused primarily on CPU-oriented, curriculum and education and workforce and all that. GPU came up in the last 5-10 years. I have scaled quite a bit, and we are beginning to understand and work on that. I submit that we will need to go into QPUs soon, right? Now, this is the only technical geeky chart. Sorry, not this one, the next one. This one, sorry, this is so simple, right? And then I will go from the simple to the complex. So you may say, what is this qubit that you're talking about, right? In classical computers, everybody has a laptop or a MacBook open, and even your phones, they all have CPUs in them, and they're all bits, zeros or one, binary. It's either on or off. That's very clear. And since the 1960s, 50s, when they were invented, we have stuck with it forever until now. Now, with qubits, you can have 0 or 1 or a value in between, any value in between. So if you think about it, it's like a dimmer switch. You either have 0 or you have a 1, which is on, fully on, or any value in between. Now, that is the power of what quantum is able to do. So it can take 3 values, not 2, 0 or 1, right? Now, how you get there is this geeky, complex, physics, quantum physics terms, which is about superposition, entanglement, and interference. I'll take just one of these and explain it and not go into the detail, but these 3 are the fundamental quantum physics phenomena that make these qubits click, or make them take values from 0 to 1 or anywhere in between, right? And that is, and the one is entanglement. If you look at entanglement, there is this theory that every bit in the universe is entangled with something else in the universe elsewhere, right? And it all started with this Big Bang, and that's what tore these entangled particles apart. And the point is, at the end of the day, one can make 2 fundamental particles get entangled or connected in such a way that even if you separate them by a distance, they still remain connected. That if you effect a change on one, the change is reflected on the other. And this is what Einstein called spooky action at a distance, right? So even if you don't know what this is, you can say, hey, I heard about spooky action at a distance, right? Good cocktail conversation, if you ask me. And the rest and where you use that spooky action at a distance is, when you measure something in quantum computing, the value disappears. So the way you measure anything is to measure the entangled particle so that you know what the value is. And even if that gets changed, you're still able to measure that, right? Now, enough of that. So the bottom line is, what do you do with all of this? What kind of problems does quantum computing solve? The way I explain it is, there are certain problems that quantum computing is never going to solve. Quantum sucks at doing multiplication. Really does. It takes several milliseconds to do a computation that is a multiplication. Now, however, the opposite of that, which is factoring, which is I give you a number and say, give me the 2 numbers I used to arrive at that product, right? Classical does not have an algorithm to do that. Quantum does. So there are certain problems that classical cannot solve that quantum will solve. So something it will never solve, meaning it will never do your payroll, it will never do your customer management and all that. Quantum's not your solution for that. It is not going to replace classical. It's going to complement classical. Now, there are other use cases where there are solutions that it offers that classical simply doesn't. Now, there is this middle ground where there are certain solutions that classical solves reasonably well, but quantum can do a lot better. Case in point, portfolio optimization, any optimization problem, right? Fraud detection. These are classical examples that you may be familiar with, where any of these optimization problems are multi-objective optimization. That is, you are trying to optimize against multiple different objectives that you want to reach. High yield, right? Lower cost, and extremely low volatility, blah, 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 right, for your portfolio. And usually, classical ends up approximating a few of them, and that's what you get. Good results, no doubt. But quantum can do a heck of a lot more such parameters or objectives and optimize them really well. So that's what we focus on. So the takeaway here is quantum is not the solution for everything. There are certain problems it doesn't do well, but there is a class of problems that it does really well, and that's what we want to focus on. And when it does that, it does really, really well. All right? Now, where do we apply these? Little complex, but the fundamental part is on the left-hand side. So using this quantum mechanic capabilities or quantum computing capabilities, you create certain fundamental algorithms, right? Taking you back to your high school days or freshman year of partial differential equation, things we hated, right? To do. This guy does better. Linear algebra, fundamental to quantum computing. So there are certain fundamental mathematical constructs that quantum does well. And again, I talked about optimization, machine learning, AI-related use cases. It does really well. So we can build algorithms that do these, right? Fundamental things. But that's technical solution or mathematical solutions to constructs. What you have to do is then turn around and apply them to industries. That's what you see on the right-hand side, right? How do you apply that to finance? How do you apply that to material discovery? How do you apply that to aerospace? How do you apply that to various industries? That's what the magic is. So quantum provides you with certain fundamental technical algorithms that we need to take, or smart people need to take, and apply that to the industry to solve problems, right? That's how you apply these. And we'll come back to this later when I talk about exactly how we solve some use cases using that. You guys with me so far? All right, good. Now, what's happened in quantum computing? A brief history. What you see here is a graph that shows some of the highlights that have happened in the last, 15 years? Since 2006 onwards, 2007 onwards, right? You find that in the last few years, right, last 5 years, there has been a significant amount of progress compared to the previous 10 or 15. Not just from IBM, but you see, Microsoft's highlighted, Quantinuum, Google, all these folks who are manufacturing or working on quantum computers are making progress. So there's a lot of advancements in the last few years. Now, one thing that I do want to call out is when you look at your MacBook, when you look at your Windows machine, when you look at your cell phone, they're all fundamentally using the same architecture. There is a CPU, there is a block of memory, and then there are some algorithm circuits that compute certain things in between. They have the ability to store an operating system and operate on this and all that, right? Standard stuff. We are not there yet with quantum computing. What do I mean by that? So Google and IBM are working on what are called superconducting qubits. The question is, I talked about these qubits and the need to entangle them and so on and so forth, right? The way we, Google and IBM, do it is we call it superconducting qubits. That means you take this, let's say, a fundamental particle down to almost absolute zero, which is like minus 273 degrees Kelvin. And that is we are about 15 millikelvin above that, meaning it is the coldest thing you can create. It is colder than outer space. The reason you do that is you don't want any temperature variation to disturb the operations, and that is when you are able to entangle them. So that's one way of doing it. So we cool them down and then begin to work with them. That's one technique. There are other techniques such as photonic qubits that other companies are using that can operate at room temperature. However, you cannot scale them beyond a certain level. A 10-qubit machine may take up this entire room, right? So it's not scalable to large industrial solutions. So there is fundamental work being done to figure out which is the best way to go. So you may see somebody saying, oh, I can carry a quantum computer in a suitcase or a briefcase. You may, but that will have 2 qubits, right? What can you do with it? Certain problems, but not many, right? So there's a lot of work being done. And we have been a leader in this for over 40 years. And we released the first quantum computer on the cloud. We put it on the cloud in 2016. So 9 years ago, we put a 5-qubit machine on the cloud that people can access. In 2017, we announced what is called a quantum network, which is actually a group of national laboratories, academia, and enterprises coming together to work on these algorithms and problems and industry solutions that I just talked about. Now, I just gave you an example of 2016 and 2017. Now, fast forward to 2022, Mike introduced this notion of 50 qubits and 100 qubits earlier. Now, this breaking the 100-qubit barrier was an important step. I'll tell you why that is in a second. But in 2022, we broke that barrier, right? We created a chip about your size of your cell phone that has 100 qubits in it. Now, why is this important? Just for comparison, if I gave you, 30 qubits, that will represent the same amount of information you can contain, or you can store in your, or you can represent in your laptop, somewhere around 17 gigabytes of data, right? Now, remember I told you that quantum can take 3 values, whereas bits or qubits can take 3 values, whereas bits can take only 2 values. The power of that is when you go to 31 qubits, you need 2 laptops, meaning it's exponential, it doubles. So at 49 qubits, you are at the capacity of the largest supercomputer we have, or Frontier is one of the supercomputers that exists in the US. At 49 qubits, you are at the level of representation of information that a supercomputer can manage. At 100 qubits, it is as if you have interconnected all of the computers that exist in the world today, just from a data representation standpoint, right? And the quantum processor we are using today, Heron, is 156 qubits. So it gives you a dimension of the power of information that it can manage and manipulate, right? I'll let that sink in for a second. Now, however, I told you earlier that a quantum computer does not work by itself. It always has to work in collaboration with, conjunction with, or complement a classical computer. We call that a quantum-centric supercomputing. Essentially, what we are saying is, look, we need to make a classical computer and a quantum computer work together to solve problems, right? I didn't have a slide on this, but in 2024, we did exactly that with Fugaku, a supercomputer in Japan, and our Heron processor to really solve chemistry problems. Because typically you say, what do I use this for first? In chemistry, you are unable to really three-dimensionally visualize and model any molecule beyond certain limits, right? You can't even represent your caffeine molecule, appropriately in this. You may say, why am I interested in coffee? Personally, I like coffee, so I do want to make better coffee, so I'm interested in it. But the point is, if you're looking to do better materials, if you're looking to invent new materials, you need to be able to visually represent them. Plus, they have an impact on drug discovery as well, so you can visualize the molecule, understand the interaction on paper as opposed to in a field trial, right? So there are definite values that this drives. So doing that is important, and that's what we demonstrated in 2024. Now, I talked earlier that we started with putting up a machine on the cloud in 2016. Right now, we have 85 computers, quantum computers on the cloud, right? And there are 9 that are outside of that in individual installations. And Cleveland Clinic has one of those, right? And we just committed one to India not too long ago. So there are very selected areas where we have an RPI as an institution has one as well. So there are very limited number of quantum computers that exist outside of our data center, right? And the network, quantum network that I talked about, the group of academia and enterprises and national labs, we have about 300 of those. And so the point is, the collaboration has grown from 2016 or 17 when we started this. So in 8 years, we have grown this much. And some of the partners or members of the quantum network are what you see here, right? And you'll see Cleveland Clinic up in the second column. There is Chicago, University of Chicago. There is University of Missouri somewhere. And so this is a combination of startups, universities, enterprises, so on and so forth, right? So this is where we are with quantum computing. So I've done 2 of the 4 sections I talked about. Any questions on this so far? Yeah.
Just curious.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just, question would be on the energy demands and whether or not there can be some sort of solution to scale things up in computing power without a similar drain on the grid. Right now we have kind of an overstretched grid, certainly in Wisconsin for residential, and we're looking at several data centers that, I mean, we're looking at nuclear, but we're quickly going to get.
So the interesting misconception folks have is that quantum takes a lot of energy. In fact, it doesn't. The energy you spend up front is in cooling it down. Once you cool it down, it takes about 60 to 120 watt of power to operate. Because unlike GPUs generate a lot of heat, right? And if you look at a data center, it is a lot of energy is spent in cooling the thing down, right? Whereas here, it doesn't generate any heat. The power is used for the microelectronic devices that surround it to send these signals to these qubits to operate the way you want. So I don't believe that at a large scale, a quantum data center is going to consume more power than a GPU-driven data center.
In the industry examples you shared before, so the problems that you listed for like aerospace and finance, like those are all problems that are being solved today.
Correct.
So what do we get when you add sort of this bridge of classical and quantum computing to those problems? So I think the first one was aerospace, and it's optimizing like wing design. Like people are doing that today. What will they be able to do now
all
in the
of
future?
these problems are using, when in execution, so let me step back. I see where the confusion is. So fundamentally, you need to have a quantum-based algorithm that you can execute that does better grid optimization or low energy fertilizer or advancement in batteries. You need to have that algorithm. However, when you begin to execute the various models on the quantum computer, you have to do it with a classical. You cannot do it by itself, right? So all of these are executed in practice with classical and quantum working together, right? So what I skipped over was, hey, what can we talk about applications? So excellent lead-in question, thank you. And what does it mean to you, right? So I'm going to tell you what I brought this up merely to refresh that these are the kinds of industry problems that are being solved, right? And then here are some very recent data points that you may have seen in the news in the last month or so, maybe 6 weeks, and because they did have an impact on our stock, so I really remember it well. HSBC announced that they have seen a 34% improvement in their trade fill predictor of bonds, right? This is real work that they have done, and they came out and published it. Vanguard came up and said, hey, we have been doing some quantum-based workflow, and if you see Pranav, it calls out quantum classical workflow. right? And this is outperforming just classical only methods. And then Wells Fargo came along and said, doing some time series analysis, I'm using less resources using quantum. I'm more frugal in quantum than in classical methods. Just 3 of the many data points that we have, and all of these have published papers that tell you exactly how it was done. So it's not us and Wells Fargo, hand waving and throwing up a PowerPoint and all that. This is supported by a proof point in a refereed journal, right? That's how we do it. So my point in bringing this up is, so these are the kinds of business problems that we are able to solve with quantum. Now you say, so what kind of skills do I need in order to do that, right? Now, there are 2 kinds of, actually 3, but I'll talk about primarily the first column and the third column. So some fundamental understanding. Remember I talked about certain algorithms that exist that you need to create? That is only a small set of algorithms I called out. There are more that can be created. It is human ingenuity that's holding us back. So the moment we are able to come up with more and more algorithms, you can create more and more solutions, right? And even existing ones can be improved. So my point is you need to have this fundamental set of foundational quantum knowledge, right? And the ability to do some programming with it. That's the left-hand side, the fundamental technical knowledge as applied to computer science. I'm not talking quantum mechanics. I'm not talking physics. I am purely talking how do you apply it to computing. That's what you need, right? And those are the courses that we also work with several universities on for recommending. And later on, I have a slide that talks about the starter set of course material that we have that one can leverage. So essentially, that's one set of courses. The last one is the industry solutions. How do I take them and apply them to create solutions for industries? Because at the end of the day, quantum computing doing research is good. Solving research problems is good, but not sufficient. Applying it to business and creating business value is where the value is, and we also need skilled resources who can go do that. So how do we get people at the intersection of industry and business, and particularly not everybody understands how do I optimize a portfolio, right? How do I optimize the route between point A and point B? Because any Amazon or FedEx driver can use that. And how do I optimize the layout of a circuit on an electronic circuit board, given certain parameters? There are so many applications of this optimization use case, but you need different industry or domain knowledge to do that. Who is going to come up with that? Who is going to train people on it, right? And then in between, you have these hybrid skills, which is how do I know these interdisciplinary skills that are needed to bridge technology to business, and this, the post-quantum cryptography that I'll talk about in the last section is all about security and cryptography within this space. These are all skills that have been brought to the forefront, and we don't have enough of. Usually when I'm on a panel or something, somebody throws me a question that says, what keeps you at night? What keeps me at night is the fact that we don't have enough skilled people in the world to address these or to take advantage of these. So I thought this would be of interest to you in terms of, hey, this is where I think as part of the higher education effort that you are actively engaged in, you may be able to think through and perhaps contribute to the advancement of these. Any questions on this? Yep.
Get the microphone, please. Thank you very much. Is it working? Okay.
Yeah.
So, this is very interesting. I originally looked at quantum computing as sort of competitive with AI, but it seems to me the way you're describing it, it's going to enable, quantum computing is going to enable a far more sophisticated capability with AI
Correct.
Than we can even dream about at this point. Is that a fair assessment?
That is perfectly correct. Any AI is about identifying patterns in a sparse matrix, as we say, or identifying patterns where none obviously exists or none, you cannot see it, with traditional means. AI is able to go and figure that out and be able to match things. Quantum does that much better. Quantum has algorithms that will go and do the identification of patterns within a matrix. It's called Grover's algorithm. So there are solutions that exist today, and machine learning, quantum machine learning, is one of those specialized areas where we already have algorithms and use cases that people are applying it to.
Oh, I'm really interested in the comment you made about energy consumption earlier. So, like one of my colleagues brought that up. We're tracking data centers. Every state's trying to get as many as possible. We're doing quite a bit in Ohio, and we're concerned about the growth in data centers and energy consumption.
Yep.
And our ability to generate enough to meet their needs. So what you're saying is that it's actually quite the opposite, that the more we grow quantum computing, because of the cooling nature of their operations, that they would require less, I don't know how much less, but some amount less than traditional data centers would.
Traditional GPU-based data centers. I don't know if I have enough data in my head right now to say, CPU-driven data centers are equal or not. But definitely, it's not going to take as much energy as GPU-based data centers do, right? And so there's a balance between the two. Definitely, the GPUs that go and do Bitcoin mining, they are just through the roof, right? Whereas here, you're not even close. In fact, I can get you some data because we are building large-scale data center in Poughkeepsie where these 80 quantum computers reside, and we are expanding them to do a lot more. I can see what information I can get from there to help you with that.
Thank you.
All right. So the question is, given that these are the skills that we need, right? How are we at least approaching it, right? So we have these quantum innovation centers, as they're called, and we establish them. That will there are about 30, 40 of these around the world that collaborate to produce this. I've just highlighted the workforce enablement part of it because that is a fundamental part of that. And the way we operate any of these QICs is to, the middle part, in addition to doing research, we focus on ecosystem building as well as in workforce development. And workforce development means skilling up the right resources depending on where this QIC is operating, and reach out to local enterprises and academia in that region, and obviously drive economic development in that space. And that is true for, and I'll use Cleveland Clinic as an illustration to call that out. But this is, again, we are not limiting it to just the workforce that currently exists and upskilling them. We also want graduate skills, bachelor skills, and even high school skills. And I was so amazed to have a junior in Dublin High School come over to me, Nayana Paturi. She's a 15-year-old, 16-year-old kid. She is doing quantum machine learning and quantum neural networks. And she is already on her own volition collaborating with MIT and has already been there a couple times. They have given her $50,000 to go and spend. And this kid is so concerned to spend $500 or something. She's saying, whoa, can I really spend this? So the point being, I came to know of her only about 3 months ago. I'm trying to mentor her and put her in touch with the right people in the industry. But my point is, right at the left edge of this, high schoolers are beginning to tap into this and want to learn. And I think we need to find a way to facilitate that. And I'm not in the education business as you are, so I know I'd submit to you that is something to take into this seriously. Now, Cleveland Clinic across the street has one of our quantum computers in their cafeteria. If only it were not being upgraded, we would have probably taken a tour so you can see that. But it's a fun thing to watch. a cube, not a cube, a cylinder sitting inside, sitting in a glass enclosure, but that's where the chandelier, where the quantum chip resides, hangs, and that's what is cooled to be cooler than outer space, and that's where the computations occur. So it's kind of interesting to watch. But the partnership is about, in this case, with Cleveland Clinic, it's about doing research on biomedical areas, right? That's what they wanted to focus on. That is their area of focus. We have Riken, which is in Japan, which focuses on chemistry-related problems, and so on and so forth. So there are different installations or partners who focus on different kinds of problems that they want to solve. But in Cleveland Clinic, I think the things to call out beyond what you can read here is that, they're building an ecosystem. They are driving certain grants that'll increase the scope and reach of the computing capabilities to the rest of the ecosystem. They are also looking at, they are partnering with Miami University, and as we were discussing earlier, they've received a $7 million grant or funding to go and develop their curriculum, both bachelor's, bachelor's, master's, and PhD programs. This is thrilling and really forward-looking, because these are the kinds of skills that we need. These are the kinds of expertise that we so seriously lack in the marketplace, right? Any questions on this so far? Yes,
I do have a question. You've mentioned several universities, Miami, University of Missouri. How do you get those partnerships?
How do we get those partnerships?
How are they developed?
So, for example, I'll use this to call out Chicago, right? So there is a Chicago Quantum Exchange that was formed, right? And we are part of that. And obviously, so is University of Chicago. So is University of Chicago, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. So you can join these, and there are universities that can join this as well. So that is one way to do it. The other is, like Cleveland University, Cleveland Clinic, if there is a quantum innovation center that is set up, we actively encourage and support and facilitate universities to go and become a member of that network or that ecosystem, so they can begin to develop curriculum. Then the third is, like RPI, we have and Virginia Tech, where we are targeting them, or collaboration between IBM and the university, to say, we want to partner in this, and we help them, or they invest some money, or a combination of this. And that's how, three models of including universities into the mix. Right? Any other questions? All right. So I think the material will be available to you. I put more material here than I was going to cover. So if you need to, you can refer to these. And I did mention earlier that I do have, we have education content that is available. So you can look at this set of curriculum that is available for you to use, right? And then I know I have about 3 minutes left. So I'll take 3 minutes to wrap this up and say, when is it going to become, mainstream, and what's the implications of that? And as promised, I'll scare you with this one, which is I told you about factorization, right? Finding out the factors of a given number. Now, there are two types of encryption that we use. We are so happy that we can comfortably send WhatsApp messages, iMessages and stuff. Not because that message cannot be captured by somebody. Anyone can capture that any motivated bad actor can get that message. However, they can do nothing with it because it is encrypted. You cannot break that encryption. That's the beauty of this, right? That's what keeps us happy. Nobody can break this. That encryption is based on this factorization. In 1974, we said, we need encryption, so let's come up with a problem that cannot be solved by classical computers. Factorization was the answer. It stood for 50 years. However, quantum has a solution. So we can factor a complex number. This RSA 2048 means there is 2048 bits, which is 367 digits that you cannot factorize. Even if you put a supercomputer to work, it will take 1,000,000 years. But quantum can do it in a matter of hours. So the scary part is all of your digital communication that you use between any 2 points, any HTTPS, TLS communication you have, any encrypted, WhatsApp end-to-end encrypted, is all going to break when you have a quantum computer available, right? That's what my focus is, not breaking it, but fixing it, right? How do we avoid that, right? So there are solutions that we have, and the solutions are being used. The government even put out a timeline saying, hey, let's get ready by 2033, because that's the timeline that we believe that we will have a computer capable of breaking encryption. But I'll tell you this. Yesterday, the Undersecretary of the Department of Energy said, hey, we need to do it better. Can we be ready even sooner than that? And the reason for that is we ourselves in IBM, we were at 156 qubits, right? We're going to go to a slightly different architecture, take it down to 120 qubits, but improve the robustness of that over the next 4 years. And then guess where we are headed in 2029? We are going to 200 logical qubits and 100 million gates. We now can do 5,000 gates, right? In 4 years, we think we'll be doing 15,000 gates, which means how many operations can you do, right? The capacity in different ways. And then in 2029, we are saying we will get 100 million gates, and by mid-2033, you will get to 2,000 qubits and 1 billion gates. Now, you are within spitting distance, if not already, at breaking encryption. So if you ask a question, when is this real? It is beginning to be real based on the use cases I showed you, Wells Fargo and HSBC and Vanguard. They're beginning to experiment, and they will be real when we get to 2028, which is not too far from here, because they need a fault-tolerant computer, and then begin to scale out right after that. The question is, do we have the skills for it? Are we ready for it? As promised, we are building a data center in Poughkeepsie, and this picture is close to being real, and we know how we are going to grow our data center to support these from where we are today to 2,000 qubits and beyond. All right, scared enough?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes,
not
please.
about this, which is terrifying, but about
Mission accomplished.
About the anticipated workforce that will help meet the needs. You talked about the skills, but like when we look at where we are now compared to where we might be in 2028 or 2033 or down the road, what levels of attainment? Because we're having conversations with our community colleges, but from as I understand it, there aren't a lot of entry points into careers in quantum at an associate degree level, but it's more at the advanced degree. Is that accurate? And
right now it is. I don't have the data point readily available, but I believe that ramp up will be consistent with the with the chips that I called out here. So in 2020, by 2029 or 2028, you will see more and more applications of quantum computing becoming real in practice. And in 2029, you will see that it's going to scale up. The question is, are we going to be ready with the workforce at that time? And it's not just postgraduate skills that we need. We believe that you also need we call it P-Tech in New York State. I think it's a diploma course, 2-year diploma course that you 2-year technical degree. That's what it is. That you finish. So there are that kind of quick on-ramp, opportunities that exist that we should be taking advantage of. Okay. Thanks.
Please join me in thanking Ray.